Hello, everyone, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Arden, and today we have Catherine with us. How are you today, Catherine?
I'm good. You too?
I'm doing well. Happy New Year to you. It is the first week of this year of 2023, and 2022 went pretty fast. You and I have been talking about Star Wars and what we were going to expect or hope to expect here in 2023. And here it is. Catherine, I can't believe we are pretty much in the midst of a new Bad Batch series. I think for a little while I wondered if there was going to be a season two, but here it is. And they debuted the first two episodes Wednesday on Disney Plus. Now, you and I are here to review that. We saw all the usual players in this: Echo, Hunter, Wrecker, Tech, and of course Omega, and of course Crosshairs is still with the Empire. Catherine, what did you think of these first two episodes overall?
I loved them. It was so much better in every way than the first season. The animation has just improved tenfold. The level of detail in the environments was jaw-dropping. I couldn't believe it. Like in those first shots on that water planet, I'm like, is this Pandora? Am I watching Avatar? Because it looked so good. And even when they go to Sereno and you're seeing all the details of the snow and the ridges and the mountains and everything in the jungle and the forest, the firefly, I'm like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And the musical score too was fantastic. Of course, Kevin Kiner, he's always doing great stuff, but especially the booming dramatic main theme for that plays during the credits even. And I also, from a story perspective, love that they aged up Omega a few years because, I mean, the first season it kind of had this 3 Men and a Baby type vibe to it because she was almost too young and didn't. It was like you're going on these combat missions, and I get it that they kept trying to protect her, keep her out of the way, but she keeps trying. It seemed kind of goofy. But the fact that she's now older, a lot clearly more skilled and more intelligent, I really like that. And it actually it jives like so much better. Kind of neat that they're going to Sereno, Count Dooku's planet, and going into his actual, mansion there, which is really cool. And talk about a great ending for the first episode. It's like as close as you get to a literal cliffhanger where you're like starting like some type of Mission Impossible stunt where they're all going out the back of the cargo plane and then just bam, cuts to black. At first, I thought I had like an internet outage or something. Like, wait, what happened? And then the credits start playing. I'm like, this is fantastic.
Well, I have to agree with you on all of that, Catherine. It was one of the most exciting episodes I've seen in a long time. And I really didn't know what to expect, especially since we know that there's this overall theme about the Empire being everywhere. And, of course, having Omega in tow is obviously going to make things more difficult. She's a young girl. And despite her abilities, despite her knowledge, despite the fact that she's learning, despite the fact that she's growing up, and she does look visibly older now. She doesn't look so innocent as she used to look. I think that she, from season one, had made a point of realizing that she didn't or wasn't going to have the same upbringing that other children have. So she already knows that she's different from everyone else. But, one of the first things that I thought about last season was, are the Bad Batch ever really going to be able to keep her out of harm's way? I mean, evading the Empire is really difficult job to do. And while they do have advantages, they have skill set. It's not an easy thing, to accomplish all the time. We start off with the episode where she's kind of away from the action, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, she's like, they still kind of try and keep her safe. I like that she still has the doll that Wrecker gave her in the first season, and she still kind of like cuddles with it. And you see that she's still kind of, like the way that when she overhears that they're talking about how, oh, it would have been better off if we didn't, have her here and stuff. And she's still really bothered by that. And the fact that she is bringing it up in a combat situation later on shows that there's a little bit of a kid still in you, because normally you'd like, okay, let's put that on the back burner until we get out of here. Uh, but I like that she's learning a lot as well. Like in the situation where they climb up from the cliff and she's like, we left the war name behind, the war chest behind. He's like, no, we have no time. We got to get to cover. If this were the first season, she would have just waited for them to slip away and not notice her, and she would have gone back down the hill to get it. But she's learning now, and like, okay, I have to, stick with the team type of thing. And so so they are keeping her still keeping a little bit of like an arm's length from her out of the combat, but it shows that she's very adept at being able to deal with it.
Well, the other interesting thing about, let's say, since we're talking about both episodes at the same time, so we jump back and forth, whatever we need to do. One other thing that I noticed is that even at this point, and I know I think they said it might be 6 months later. I don't know how many months later, but she looks so much older in this. I honestly think it could be a year later, but if it's 6 months, then it's 6 months. Then it really does seem like they can't really trust, or the let's say the group, the Bad Batch group, can't trust anyone to watch Omega. They have to take her on these missions. At least that's the impression I'm getting, Catherine. Even when they go back to the home planet, let's say their base, where they're getting these missions, they're getting, intel so they can do these missions. I don't think it's safe for them to leave her alone anywhere. And, that's very interesting that they have to take her along everywhere. It's highly unrealistic to do this, especially since they are doing things dangerous. But I would have never guessed, Catherine, that they would be going to Count Dooku's castle. Catherine, oh my gosh, right in the middle of what feels like the Empire is just literally situated, well situated. They know the castle, they know the planet. This was ballsy. What did you think of that, Catherine?
Well, I liked it. It made sense because that's where the money's going to be, or because he inherited that fortune, and I like also that you have that other character who brings up the fact that yeah, Dooku's he really railroaded us too, which is interesting for the timing because this comes just a couple months after the Dooku arc in Tales of the Jedi, where they painted him in a much more understanding type of sympathetic light, and so I like that they have somebody reminding us like not so fast, but you're right, going into Imperial territory, which I like that it's still patrolled by clones because it's not like Palpatine would have just killed all the loyalists. I mean, yes, he wants to eventually weed them out and replace them with stormtroopers, but he's not going to just throw them away on a whim just because Order 66 is over with. So I thought it was neat that they're facing clones, and the kind of implied setup that's going to be going. Wouldn't it be neat if you have other clones hunting the Bad Batch because they could really get in their heads, And I was surprised by that twist at the end where the Imperial Admiral, whatever, shot the clone. Because the clone's like, like they say, good soldiers follow orders. I can't falsify a report even though you're ordering me to do so. And he just shits. I'm like, oh, ballsy. But so yeah, I love that.
Well, do you think that the Bad Batch can realistically just retire after doing a huge heist? Is this realistic to expect, knowing how badly they're going to be hunted? Maybe even especially now, even with the ending that we saw in episode 2, Catherine, I have to think that, that commander, he knows that they're alive. Maybe he knew all along, but now he might feel he has to pursue them some other way. Catherine, what do you think?
Yeah, he's going to pursue them because even though he's going to lie in the report and say that Clone Force 99 wasn't involved, he knows eventually somebody else is going to figure it out that they're still out there, which is going to make them look inefficient for having not finished them off in the first place. So they are going to hunt them. But another reason the Bad Batch can't really retire is because, as they addressed in the episode, there's too many horrible things going on in the galaxy. We can't just sit by and do nothing. And that might come back to bite them. Like maybe they're going to lay low for a while, and then they're going to, like that Admiral, he's probably going to try and smoke them out, And the Bad Batch is going to do what they do best. He's going to come and try and save the day. So, as I understand it, this is only going to be a 2-season series. So I don't know how many episodes this is going to be. So yeah, that Admiral, okay, yeah, he's by the book, evil, whatever. But I hope they do. I know they got to bring back Crosshair at some point in some type of capacity to have to have a heavy for the season. But yeah, I don't picture them just laying low and just continuing to do simple heist jobs for what's her name. They're better than that. They can do. They're more, you don't come up with an idea like Bad Batch just to have them go off and do random robberies.
Yeah, that's something else to think about, is that they might be the most skilled set in the bunch. And to be honest with you, they go on this heist, but the second heist, let's say, they go on the second heist to Count Dooku's castle. I wasn't quite sure what we were going to see when we got in there, because he has such a prestigious family, Catherine. And so I wondered, my imagination went a little crazy. I said, are we going to see tapestries on the wall? Are we going to see like the Count Dooku family tree? I haven't been so excited to go into, a castle or palace or whatever you want to call it in ages. But of course we didn't see that, but we did see jewels that I've never seen, some of those jewel, valuables before those gemstones. Wow, that looked amazing. But something that I kind of wonder about is this was one of those heists where they were not successful, so to speak. Or if somebody did grab some jewels and it's in their pocket, that's fine. But it didn't turn out as planned. In fact, somebody ended up with broken bones, and I'm sure they have had that happen to them before. But is this foreshadowing, implying that these heists are a done deal for them? They really can't do those anymore.
Well, now that they're going to have the Empire on their tail and probably a whole battalion of them chasing them down, it's certainly going to be harder. And once they get back home and they say, sorry, we didn't succeed, and it's like, oh, I wouldn't be surprised if she closed down the operation, because it's like, oh, they're going to come for us, we got to go. But yeah, like going into, like when they went into Dooku's house and they expected to find all sorts of stuff, and it's like there's really, because we've seen Dooku's house before in Clone Wars, and that same big, that grand chamber, and it was very minimalist. I agree with you. I thought it would have been cool if his house had like tapestries and all that type of stuff, because we know how vastly wealthy they are. And instead it was like this very, the same kind of dark, just stone carving work or whatever, those beautiful, stained glass windows. But yeah, I don't think the heists are gonna, like, what's his name is going to be recovering from that injury for a while, and they it's like, and now they're going to be on the run from this Imperial Admiral or whatever his rank is, and Crosshair is going to pop up at some point, because you could bet that Imperial officer is going to try and find who's the best person running this down. Oh, we got somebody who used to be with them who's going to be able to get in their head. Come on, here, I'll give you a whole Star Destroyer and a whole battalion to go hunt them down now,
Well, certainly Crosshair is the first thing that everybody thought of, because the implication is, and we don't know if this is true, but the implication is pretty strong that he didn't say anything about, the Bad Batch getting away, so to speak, and let the story lie, so to speak. I don't even know, kind of just didn't alert anybody. I wasn't shocked that Crosshair didn't say anything. What did you think? Or let's say if this is the truth, we don't know if that's true, but if that were the case and Crosshair didn't say anything, were you surprised by that? Would you be surprised if he just
No, because he's not going to tell them that they had him cornered on that platform, had him dead to rights, and that they just let him go. Because the destruction of Kamino went rather simple. It went well. And the idea that, oh, well, by the way, they got out and they attacked and blah, blah, blah. And he could tell that they weren't like going to be forging any type of rebel alliance or anything like that. So it's, on the one hand, he's justified in thinking, well, I can lie about this. It's not really going to come back to bite me. They're just going to go off with this girl, and who knows where they're going to go. Because if he were to say that, oh, yeah, we kind of failed at that, and it's like, and you didn't raise the alarm immediately when you got picked up, it's like, yeah, so I could see why he would have plenty of incentives not to tell the truth about that.
I think that this season, not that we didn't get a hint of it in season 1, but I think in season 2, The Bad Batch, we are getting a lot more character development. And, each character they're a little bit deeper. And I'm actually feeling a little sad for them in a sense, especially when they get to that planet where Count Dooku's palace is at, and they come across that native person who talks about heritage and keeping the traditions and history of his people alive. And I think it's Tech who says, oh, I didn't know about that. I was completely unaware of that. Very similar to how Omega starts to realize that her life was different from the typical child. What do you think the significance of that was for the clones, for the Bad Batch in particular?
Well, because they were, clones, they weren't exactly briefed on all the cultures and the differences of, the different species, everything like that on all the other planets. So they were just like, you're supposed to follow orders, here you go. And because they had, the flukes that made them the Bad Batch, that didn't really, I mean, yes, they're more capable of learning and adapting, but because they've sort of been off doing their own thing, they haven't really thought about the inner politics of what the war was actually about, and how there were real people involved who got screwed over. It's like, oh, Sereno, that's Count Dooku's planet. Count Dooku's evil, so I guess everything on the planet is evil. Which is why they're kind of, surprised when they see that, oh, he's a nice guy and he actually risks his life to come and save them. And so it's, character growth for the batch.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and I think this might be the season where they start to realize one, what their actual place is in the galaxy, but two, what they want to do with the rest of their lives. I think that that's something that's critical, and I get a sense that maybe they're not the only clones who are feeling this way, because when we did see that clone, I can't remember his name, was it Wilco, who was standing next to Admiral Rampart. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, Rampart, offs him because he wants to report that Force 99 is still around. Um, we saw something that was very interesting. I don't remember the last time I saw a clone, kind of like say, "Well, no, I can't do that," to an admiral or to anybody who was giving them an order. What did you make of that, Catherine? The response of, that clone just not wanting to do what the admiral was asking him to do.
Just programming. Good soldiers follow orders, and that's against protocol. So he's like, I'm not going to do that. And then we've had other clones similar to Bad Batch. Like in season 1 and season 2, you had the two rogue clones, the one who, tried to kill the Jedi or whatever in season 1, and then in season 2, the one who became the deserter and started a family and all that because they're realizing, this isn't really, we're basically being cranked off an assembly line to fight a war that we don't really care about or understand, and what are we doing? Whereas you have other clones like the one who wouldn't alter the paperwork, who's just so, brainwashed or whatever into the system, or just coded that way that he's, even though it's an admiral giving him an order, he's not gonna. It's like, sorry, it goes against, cannot compute, goes against programming, goes against protocol.
Yeah, it's something to think about because I'm not quite sure whether or not it means that we're going to be seeing more clones saying no, so to speak, to not just, let's say, the admiral in this case, but to the empire. Since you and I both know that at some point they're going to be bringing in constricts. I'm saying this wrong. Um, they're going to be recruiting new people as new stormtroopers that are not clones. So, this is a point where things are rather critical for the clones in the sense of their future is not so bright, if you will. But I also think, and I'm also wondering how far, when the Bad Batch in season 1 had rebelled, it felt like they could go anywhere and didn't have to necessarily, like, the galaxy was huge and they could just, there'd be plenty of places for them to hide. Why do I feel like there's very few places for them to hide now? Could the empire have grown exponentially? Like, is that even possible?
Well, it has. It's probably grown a lot. I mean, there's 1,000,000,001 places the Bad Batch could hide, but it's not really something that they're interested in doing. It's like they like going out on these kind of combat heist missions because it gives them something that, they're doing something. And like they said, they're not really in the mood for running away. So it's not like they're going to go find some near uninhabited planet in the Outer Rim and just, camp out. And, so yeah.
Yeah, it's something to think about, and I wondered about that since I from what I've heard from some of the reviews of the entire season, although the last 2 episodes were not episodes that anybody has access to. And you were asking how many episodes. I think it's either 14 or 16. It's kind of a lot of episodes, more than I thought we would get. And honestly, I thought they were going to release the first 3 versus the first 2, but the first 2 were so good. I'm almost thinking to myself, you know what? It doesn't even matter because those first 2 episodes were just so spectacular. But I am wondering about, going forward with what they want to do with the Bad Batch. We're certainly going to see that. I suspect that they're going to maybe separate from Omega somehow. Last season, we saw Fennec Shand was kind of involved. I wasn't sure who she was working for, but she was kind of watching over Omega, if you will. I mean, I can't remember if they had a confrontation or they spoke or what it was, but she seemed to help her out a little bit. Do you think we're going to see Fennec Shand again?
Well, if there are like 16 episodes, I would hope that we get to see some of those types of characters again. Because, I mean, the first season had a lot of filler. And so it'd be nice to, I think she probably, like you said, we didn't really know who she was working for. I got the vibe that she didn't really like her. Maybe she did. So and undoubtedly, Crosshair would recruit other bounty hunters to help hunt down the Bad Batch. So you might see Cad Bane again.
Yeah, for certain, and I'm kind of hoping that we will see that. This is a very interesting time in the empire and how the empire is kind of going to be almost go towards reaching its peak, if you will. If the empire does have a peak, if the empire does have that moment in time, I don't know what moment of time that is. But I don't see the Bad Batch necessarily sticking around with Omega too much. I think that what's going to happen is that she might develop to a point where she herself cannot do this anymore. And I think that her desire to take risks, which is fine, she can take risks, but I think that she's not going to want to do it at the expense of other people because so many people have had her back all this time. As a character, I think that part of her growing up is going to be, I can't let you guys do this anymore. I have to be able to, stand on my own a little bit more, even though she's just a child, honestly. But I have a feeling she's going to do that. She's going to say, I can't be in a situation where you guys are getting hurt because you're constantly protecting me and you can't do missions or whatever it is you want to do with the rest of your life. Do you think Omega will walk away from the Bad Batch?
Maybe. I mean, the fact that they're not giving out the final 2 episodes to critics tells me that that's probably where they're going to circle back around to the mystery of who she is, which on the one hand is a little frustrating that they're going to once again drag it out for a whole other season. But if she is bonding, on the one hand, I wouldn't think she'd want to leave them if she considers them family. But if they do get, in a situation where they can't really go out anymore because they're such, high profile fugitives, then maybe she would do something that would actually prevent them from going out there again. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing that kind of worries me because you and I both know that they know Omega exists and they're looking for her. Is that not correct, Catherine?
Yeah.
So, with that being said, would she go so far as to even turn herself in or use herself as a pawn to protect others? What do you think?
Probably. Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting, thinking about her doing that. And I I almost wonder whether she holds some kind of key to making more clones. But why wouldn't the Empire want to make more clones anyway, just as a backup? We already know that there's going to be constructs coming forward, but the clones, as far as I'm concerned, came in pretty handy and convenient for the Empire. Would there be any reason why they wouldn't go ahead and create another clone force?
Well, he's already bombed all the facilities, and I think the idea is because they have microchips, they're susceptible to sabotage and stuff like that, even though it is logically kind of dumb to get rid of them. It's like a story problem they have because they specified that the stormtroopers. Actually, nobody specified in the original trilogy that the stormtroopers weren't clones because you never really saw them without their helmets on or anything. But since that was George's edict about it, then it's like, well, we have to come up with a reason why he kills the clones, and they never really did have a reason because how many of the clones didn't follow Order 66? Barely any, like less than a fraction of a tenth of a percent, So, I mean, yeah, I could see the admirals and other corporals would be frustrated with clones because they're so stuck on protocol. They're not going to follow their orders to be corrupt when they're trying to cover up their own mistakes. But the idea that the Emperor just wants to get rid of them all wholesale just admittedly feels a bit contrived. Sort of like how Yoda thinks that, oh, these Skywalker babies are going to be the only ones able to save us. It's like, really? But that's like a fantasy because Star Wars is a fantasy, and that plays along with classic fairy tale storytelling. But when you take the fantasy hat off and think about it from a more logical perspective, it's like, heck, that really doesn't make that much sense at the end of the day. And I kind of feel the same way about the Emperor's desire to just completely destroy the cloning facility, especially since it's in such a isolated location, like up above the Rishi Maze, out way out there, and it's like you could shore this place up like crazy, like the prison that we saw in Andor, where they killed apparently the native population and wiped it out to keep it isolated. And with Tapoka City and Camino, you don't have that problem because this is a massive ocean. So it is a little contrived. They might progress part of the story and coming up with other problems that clones might be having to try and make that logic go down easier. Who knows? We'll see.
And also, Crosshair, of course, is playing, very important into this series, which we all had anticipated. It makes complete sense. I don't know whether I necessarily want Crosshair to have a redemption, so to speak. I wouldn't mind if Crosshair conveniently let things lie the same way he did, at the end of season one. I think that's somewhat more interesting for him. But if they did decide to do a redemption arc, do you think that he would, somehow meet up with the Bad Batch again? Or is he going to kind of completely sacrifice himself too?
I don't picture himself because he seems so over the edge, as it were. I don't picture him coming back. And it wouldn't be interesting per se if it's like, oh, well, maybe the reason he's this way is because there was a different chip or whatever. Let's just pry it out. Oh, he's great. Welcome back. And frankly, not every villain in Star Wars needs to be redeemed. It's like, why? It's the same thing with, every protagonist in Star Wars doesn't need to be an orphan, but they are. And so uh, I I kind of would like Crosshair to go even further over the deep end. Like maybe he's going to be really upset to learn that not only the Bad Batch didn't stay low and hide on some backwater planet. Like, no, they're out there committing major heists and potentially going to start causing problems. That's going to really get under his skin,
Yeah. He would be like, that doesn't make any sense, or try to logically figure out what's going on. I think he would be very surprised about that. And I kind of wonder, a lot of these jobs that are happening, we do see the sort of the shop lady who gives them the assignments, but who does she work for? You mentioned Cad Bane and some other underground syndicate peeps, but it would be interesting to have those things finally revealed going forward. But yeah, it would be very interesting. I don't see, like I said, I think Crosshair is going to do the same thing he did in season 2, because he doesn't have to do more. I think Crosshair's idea is that he will do something that's the most efficient way to handle something. And if there's no payoff to necessarily bringing in the Bad Batch for him or for anyone really, it's just to prove a point. It's just to prove a point and make them an example for other people to be afraid of the Empire. But the Empire loves that. So at the very least, they would want to do something like that, even if it's at the expense of, a lot of manpower, a lot of money. Maybe that's something that they'll want to do. But I personally don't think that Crosshair is necessarily going to go one side or the other. He's going to just kind of look at it realistically and say, well, what works out best all around? I think I don't think he's altruistic. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I don't think he was altruistic in not reporting things. I think he was just practical. And, if someone were to ask him, because we know that this is going to happen, right, Catherine? We know that the Admiral's going to go up to Crosshair and say, I saw Clone Force 99. What will Crosshair say? I think Crosshair will say, well, something, it was not a viable option for us to pursue Clone Force 99 at that time or something. What do you
I think he's just going to say that the obvious cop out would be, they were underground, like underwater in the facility when it got completely bombed to smithereens. There was no reason for them to stick around and think that they would have survived. And that's all he has to say. It's like, yeah, we blew the city to smithereens and they were deep inside the complex. Or why would they have survived? How could they have survived? Because they dedicated an entire episode in the season finale last season to showing the convoluted way in which the Bad Batch escapes from the bowels of Topeka City. And so he doesn't really have to tell them about the confrontation on the platform. It's because nobody else witnessed it. He's like, yeah, you bombed the place, they're gone. And he might even counter and say, well, how do you know that Clone Force 99 was involved? Did you personally see them, Corporal?
Well, that's another question that I have, Catherine. And so it's about who witnessed what in these 2 episodes. And, I think it's very clever. We do hear Omega talking about stealth and telling some of the members, you have to act in stealth. We can't kind of like go in there, guns blazing, making a whole bunch of noise. And I'm almost wondering whether, it's not that the Bad Batch can't act in a stealth way, because it seems like 99.9% of the time they do act in a stealth way. But we know Wrecker is not stealth. It's not his style. Who actually saw? Who were the people who saw it? Did you think they got onto a surveillance tape? Because the Admiral seemed pretty confident that it was them. We saw Wilco said that he had a positive identification. Wilco said he saw it positively. How many people know and actually saw them on that day? Do you think it was just Wilco?
Well, as far as we know, so far it's just Wilco. And again, there's nothing stopping if he lies on the report, which he's going to do, which is why he shot him, then it's not an issue. And the only issue that the only reason the Empire would potentially care about Clone Force 99 is because they have Omega. because it was implied in the first season that this isn't just a Camino thing. Like, they still, even when they were in the process of trying to shut down the facility, they still wanted her, and that'll be the question, because up until Wilco said stated what he had seen, they just assumed that, oh, Omega and 99 just all, perished in the bombing of Tapoka City. So, it's up for grabs. Like, maybe the corporal's just going to drop it, because again, if he lies in the report, then the official story is still that Clone Force 99 perished, and he doesn't have to say that, hey, none of my troops saw anything, we didn't see anything. So it might. I think what might happen is he's gonna lie, but word might get around. Like, maybe Crosshair found out about it, and he's gonna like he's not gonna let the fact that he got totally humiliated on the platform go unanswered. It's like, no, I'm gonna get these guys.
Well, that's
and
very
maybe he will be
interesting.
leading the charge.
That's very interesting thing, and I hadn't thought about that he might feel as if he was undermined. It's all of them against him versus, he didn't have that same team that the Bad Batch has, so to speak. So maybe he feels like it was not a fair fight for him.
Well, that, and he also feels like they betrayed him, because he was totally into that good soldiers follow orders mindset, and he couldn't really fathom why they were doing what they were doing. So he probably takes that personally, because he had been with them for a while, and he's like, oh, how could you do this? He might really want revenge.
Yeah, and that's something else too, is that, that's another, let's say, possibility, and something that I hadn't thought about is he might want revenge, might be another reason to hunt the Bad Batch down, other than just to make an example out of them, which I had not thought about. And it is very interesting to look at that there. So what do you think going forward? Because I've heard a number of people saying that there were a lot of reviewers who got to see, I guess, maybe the first 14 or the first 12 episodes, about how, there's going to be a lot of moral dilemmas, and it's going to continue to deal with oppression from the Empire, which we're not surprised by. But there is going to be this metamorphosis. I suspect a lot of the metamorphosis is going to be with Omega, but are we going to see any kind of changes throughout the Bad Batch too, including with Crosshair?
No, it's probably because you're going to have character growth somewhere. I mean, they spent most of season 1 just sort of cementing their individual personalities and idiosyncrasies and having just fun little adventures. But if the series finale of this show is truly so great that they're keeping it under wraps, whereas they were comfortable giving critics the first 12 or 14 episodes of the season, then I would imagine there's got to be that it's not all just going to be filler. Like, there's going to be some instant, because if the finale to be as effective as it sounds like it's going to be, you have to have character growth leading up to that moment. Otherwise, what are people going to care? So I would imagine that we're going to see a lot of character growth from everybody throughout the season.
Now, this season is going to run into Star Wars Celebration, isn't it?
If there's 16 episodes, that's 14 weeks, so 2 months. Let's see, 1, 2, almost. Yeah, that's almost 3 months. So that'll take us. What are we right now? It's January 6th, so that'll be 1, 2. Well, yeah, right. It should be ending like the week before Celebration, or 2 weeks before, and it's also going to run through Mandalorian season 3. So they're going to have an overlap for the first month on those two shows.
That is very
or
interesting.
On the first month of Mandalorian, I mean, yeah.
I've also heard some chatter about because we did see some of the doctors, and I don't know whether they're bringing another doctor back, although I can't imagine why, but I guess maybe someone would need to handle Omega. Is she going to get away, or is the Empire going to get Omega? This is my last question for you, Catherine.
They might, or like you suggested, maybe she'll make the sacrifice play to save them, because the running theory is that her has something to do, of course, with the Darth Sidious resurrection project from Exegol, because that's sort of what John and Dave have been doing ever since episode 9 came out. They've kind of been trying to rationalize that bizarre decision that somehow Palpatine returned in the Mandalorian storytelling. They hinted at it a little bit in Book Boba Fett. So it's like I feel that has some, that the root of that technology goes back to Camino with whatever the Omega thing is, because we know from all the other lore that takes place after Bad Batch, there's nothing else similar to Omega clone wise that we could point to that this must be what she's about. So it's like, well, where exactly is it going? And given the time period and the fact that this is only 2 seasons, the only bombshell I could possibly think of is if it relates again to the Sid Darth's resurrection project, his contingency in some way.
Yeah, it is something to think
So
about.
yeah, they might
And
hit her.
yeah, I have a feeling that I'm not being pessimistic about it. I just don't think she's going to get away necessarily. And I think part of what she's seeing on her face is that they've kind of like used up all of their 9 lives, if you will. They are certainly traveling a little too close to the surface of the sun. And I think that she's going to do something major only because she was willing. It's not that I think there's anything wrong with her trying to get the gemstones, but um, this was a prize prize. This was something of value that we'd never seen before. So that's giving me an indication that what she's going to do is going to reveal something we haven't seen before, some kind of something that's valuable about her. And she's not going to be able to walk away with it. She's going to have to leave something behind. So for me, it feels like as if that means that she's going to have to, she wants to do something else, but she's going to have to leave that thing of whatever it is behind. And I think it's the Bad Batch. I think she's going to have to leave them behind in order to really grow. So I think that is coming down the pike. But as we said, we got to go to Dooku's temple. And I guess there's so many caches all over the galaxy. Um, Catherine, I feel like I wish I could do some kind of search and say Star Wars caches, Sith, Empire or whatever, and see, like if there's any references to some major caches throughout the empire. I hadn't occurred to me that they would be recycling whatever Dooku had. Who else was on the plate who perished? Who had wealth like that. These are different things I'm thinking of. We saw Luthen's treasure trove at his shop, there, and he has a bunch of things. I'm not saying he's a Sith, but boy, those things must be valuable. Those artifacts that he has on Coruscant, but those are in plain sight. Dooku's is away in some kind of palace hidden somewhere. I can't wait to find out what they tell us. And I do like that they tied, as you said, together what we saw in Tales of the Jedi, and now we hear about Dooku again. This is really exciting to even hear these developments about Dooku and learn about him kind of in this way, in a way where he's not here, but then we kind of get a sense of his power, of his wealth, of his really standing in the galaxy, maybe one of the most wealthiest Siths, ever. So I am kind of curious as to what we're going to see going forward with what we discover about some of the people from the dark side, so to speak. I want to see a little bit more of that, what was going on with them. It was intriguing to see that, and I think they're going to let us in and find out a little bit more about the empire, some other things. And the final thing that I was going to say is we already knew that these plans were much more detailed than what we were seeing. We knew that this was a well-organized, well-structured response that the emperor has had in place, all these different plans, all these contingency plans. Certainly, we're seeing some miraculous situations play out. It is entertaining to watch, Catherine. What do you think is going to be the next thing that we're going to see? We already know what the final outcome is, but what else do you think we're going to see from the emperor?
Ooh, the Emperor. I'm not sure if he's going to make an appearance in the series or not, uh, because it's not really clear who is running point on the hunt for Omega. Because again, as far as I know, they seem to think she died. I would assume they believe she died with the rest of Clone Force 99 up until Wilco, raised the alarm and says, "Hey, they're still out there." And even though this admiral's going to lie on the report, the question is he going to privately report to somebody else that, "Hey, I think they're still out there"? Because if there is still a bounty on her head, which I imagine there is, that admiral or Rampart might think, I could cover up this report to cover my ass now, but we could look at how much greater standing I will achieve if I tell, the Emperor, whoever he would report to, that, hey, you could still get her. She's still out there. So that would be interesting, but I'm not sure if it's going to go all the way up the ladder to the Emperor himself or maybe Darth Vader instead. Because, he's out there doing the Emperor's bidding. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it would be interesting if there was some kind of, I'm not saying it has to be a direct encounter, but even the sense we're enjoying even the hint of hearing someone else's name, like we heard Dooku, was good enough, Catherine, to certainly, spur the imagination and fascination with Dooku, who has, kind of like had this second coming, so to speak. I guess from last year's, Tales of the Jedi to now. As I said, I was hoping we would discover something else in that temple. We didn't, but we certainly did see that he had an impact on the planet and that particular planet, and the people did not like what he was doing. And I'm sure at the end, Dooku probably, kind of regretted that from what we saw in Tales of the Jedi. He has regrets. So certainly not a perfect life, but he had such a major influence on the galaxy, an incredibly powerful Sith, that it was nice to see some more of that story. We got a little bit more of the story about Mace Windu too in Tales of the Jedi. I don't think we're going to be seeing him here, but maybe we will. Who knows? But I did just want to mention that I give this first two episodes like maybe an 8.5 to a 9. The second episode maybe almost a perfect score, but between the two of them I would give it 8.5 to a 9. How would you rate these first two episodes, Catherine?
I give them both an 8. I think it was pretty good start for season 2.
Yeah, it was a good start. This is exactly the type of excitement we were hoping to see. Certainly something very interesting. It didn't feel boring. The pace was perfect. We learned a lot about the characters. We got to go to different planets. We also learned some very interesting things about their host on, who gives them the missions. We may not see her very much after this. I think she's been maybe even protecting them a little bit. It's been working, like she's been getting money, but I have a feeling that it's going to backfire for her too, unfortunately, as nice as she is. Who knows what's happening there. I think we're going to see Fennec Shand again here. And of course we know we're going to see Crosshairs and obviously this Admiral. So we are I think, really going to have such a treat with the next few episodes, Catherine. And thank you so much for reviewing these first two. There was a lot to talk about them. We didn't even touch on everything, but certainly it was so enjoyable to watch them. Catherine, where can people find you?
Find me every Wednesday night on the Phantasmagorium Show, co-hosting movie review shows with Scott. You can find me on the Unifying Force on the Virtual Cantina Network every second and fourth Sunday of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific on Facebook and YouTube, or at Facebook, and also find me on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter at Slice9.
Excellent, guys. And please do check out Catherine there on those channels. Guys, you can always find me here on Positive Fandom or on the Bur Network or on the 1/6 Scale Man Network or on Lorena Creel's channel. Thank you so much, Catherine, for joining me today. For everybody watching, I hope you all are well this new year. And remember, no matter where you are out there, always do remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.